Right. Well, thank you all for coming. This is the Science of Happiness talk. So, what we have to look at is consciousness, and essentially, that's what occurs in your mind, the thinking apparatus. And if you want a presentation of this slideshow, which is 150 slides, it's already on my website. You can put it in library.pdf, and it's there, so you don't have to asked me to hold the slides so that you can take photos. So Einstein famously said that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So you have your conscious mind and then your subconscious. And then for me, what I study is the subconscious, and the three entry points into the subconscious are jokes, magic, and dreams. So I don't work with dreams. That's like Carl Jung's type stuff. There might be a little magic, and I work with jokes because that's the entranceway into the subconscious. So here's my favorite joke. The CIA is interviewing for the greatest hit person in the world, and there's three contestants. So the first guy comes up, and they say, okay, for your final assignment, you have to take this gun, go into that restaurant. In the corner is your wife. You have to blow her brains out and come outside. She says, okay. Guy goes inside, and there's silence, comes outside, puts the gun down, and says, I couldn't do it. Second guy comes up. They say, okay, for your final assignment, you have to go into this restaurant. In the corner, in the booth, is your wife. You have to blow her brains out and come outside. He says, okay. Takes the gun, goes inside, there's silence, comes outside, puts the gun down, says, I couldn't do it. Third contestant is a woman. They say, okay, for this final assignment, you have to go into that restaurant. In the corner is your husband. You have to blow his brains out and come outside. She goes inside. There's silence. And then there's a bit of a ruckus. She comes outside. She puts the gun down. She goes, you fucking idiot. You gave me a gun full of blanks. I had to kill him with a chair. So what is in your subconscious that if that joke is with two penguins and an Eskimo, it's not funny? Or if it's with whatever. So that's what I'm interested in, like how people, like my cat doesn't tell jokes. Like it's a very human phenomenon. And so what I think is that it's the compression between what you should have thought and what you failed to think, meaning that, and that's why I think it's important access into the subconscious. Because I think when I say he's as dumb as a blank, your mind rifles through like 50 things. And if I say any one of those, it's not funny. And if I say something that's completely absurd, it's not funny. And then there's this margin where you think, oh, that's funny. I should have thought of that. And that's what I think humor is. And that's why I think it's so important. And I'll tell you a second joke that'll lead into all this. So, guy goes into a psychotherapist's office and he says, doctor, I think I'm a seed, a grain of wheat. And the doctor says, oh, that's really terrible. We have to put you in an insane asylum. So, the guy goes into an insane asylum, and then 6 months later, they say, okay, case cured. You're a man. You think you're a man. Like go out and they have a big party for him, and they send him out into the world. So the guy goes out, and then he rushes back in, and he's standing there against the door. And the doctor says, "What happened? We just spent the last 6 months convincing you that you're a man and not a seed, a grain of wheat." And he says, "I know I'm a man and not a seed, a grain of wheat, but does the chicken outside know?" So for me, we enroll people in our lives. And that's why we have to examine our way of being and then, how we relate to the outside world. And then how do you keep up with all these crazy changes in the world, a thing that we consider to be normal? So I just take a look at this.
Son, you're not a kid anymore.
Oh, no, I go to health class, Dad. I already know all the stuff.
Well, they don't teach you about everything in health class. Okay, Mr. Smartypants? So just listen. When boys and girls get a little older, they start getting interested in one another, right?
And non-binary people, agender, intergender, FTX, gender fluid people.
What?
There's more than just boys and girls now, Dad. And they're not girls, they're women.
Yeah, okay, sure. Well, my point is that sex is it's a very important decision.
How are you defining sex? Sex is different things to different people.
Because when a penis goes into a vagina,
What if there's 2 men or 2 women or more?
more.
How would you define sex with multiple simultaneous partners? Or what if somebody's undergone genital reconstruction or is intersex?
No, but I'm just talking about normal, straight.
Normal. Come on, Dad.
Okay, here we go. Let me ask you this. Son, are you attracted to women?
Yes, but I'm young.
Is Emily a woman?
Biologically.
Okay, you're attracted to women. Emily's a woman. So if you were to have sex with Emily,
I wouldn't just have sex with Emily. We'd have to make that decision together. Homecoming's not an excuse to ignore consent.
I'm not saying to ignore consent. I never said ignore consent. You and Emily, right, consensually decide to have sex.
Vaginal?
Yes, vaginal.
Just 2 of us.
How many people do you want? That's just the two of you, Colin.
And I'm playing the traditional male role.
Go to homecoming.
You seem like you really wanted to talk about this.
No, I don't want to talk about anything. Bring it.
So here we go.
Please do. Ow. Thank you. Don't forget your massage.
Hey, Dad.
Yeah.
How do I look?
You look very handsome, son.
That's gender coding, but
Get out of my house!
So you can see just in one generation how all the mores have changed and our language has changed around everything. My favorite quote is, I don't know who discovered water, but I doubt it was a fish. And what I have to do today in the next 50 minutes is take you on a little roller coaster ride. I have to rattle your cage a little bit. I have to give you some new tools because when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem resembles a nail. Okay, so just think of this room as a dressing room, and we'll try some things on, and if they fit, then keep them, and if not, just leave them behind at 3 o'clock. So language creates reality, and what I'm asking you is, like, could you even think like outside of language? Some people do. You know, Peter Gabriel says, I think in pictures, not in words, on Peter Gabriel too. And there's, I would assume like Rothko and some other painters, like they think in images. You know, Beethoven and Mozart received symphonies. So, you know, just question, like you have all these words floating around your mind. And, you know, it's a very human situation. So what would you think if you didn't have language? And then, you know, we're going to ask some questions about how accurate that language is. So this is really funny to me. There's no egg and eggplant or ham and hamburger. If a vegetarian eats vegetables, what does a humanitarian eat? If adults commit adultery, do infants commit infantry? We park on driveways and we drive on parkways. These are real headlines. And it's funny because there was one in the New York Times last week where you could have read it 2 different ways. It was on the cover of the New York Times, and it was similar to this, like about troops. So I'm asking you to entertain the possibility that language is a prison, a cage. You know, we think we can think infinite things, but can we really? You know, Lacan said, language thinks me. Very interesting, right? Language thinks me. So you all assume that you know why you want the things that you want, but I'm asking you the question, like, do you really know? Because for me, as sentient beings, what we really desire is to be loved unconditionally. And we're born in and we're given language, we're thrown into language, as Heidegger says, and we're only given tools to gain love conditionally because we're hip and cool, we speak well, whatever. And, you know, if you sit around cafes as much as I do, you'll see people like fighting for prestige in some weird way. You know, they're trying to one-up each other. You can see it with by their handbags or things like that. Right? You talk about your, like, where you vacation and things like that. So at the end of the day, when you're in those discussions, what you're trying to get is admiration. And what I'm asking you to entertain today is like, would you rather be admired or would you rather be loved? So I tend to democratize things in my psychotherapy practice by asking people, like, what do you want to say on your tombstone? Do you want to say, used to be really admired? Do you want to say, profited on Bitcoin? Do you want to say, wealthiest person in this cemetery? Do you want to say, owned a large house with a great zip code? No, any sane person wants their tombstone to say beloved, and yet 90% of the things that we talk about are actually things that would just get us admired. So I'm asking you to just, when we have lunch, to just think about the things, the subjects that you want to introduce. This is my favorite tombstone. So there was a survey done, and out of 1,000 elderly people, how many of them said that you should choose work based on your desired future earnings? How many of them said it's important to be at least as wealthy as the people around you, and if you have more money, it's a real success? How many of them said you should try to work as hard as possible to make money to buy the things that you want? 0. At the end of people's lives, the most common thing you'll hear is, I should have loved more. Okay, so do you think your thoughts or your thoughts think you? It's funny, my first book, I quote William Gertzman, who said, money makes us creatures of time. And that's fascinating to me because normally I'll give these lectures like at the end of the month, and then people are like thinking of mortgages or rent or credit card bills, or all of us are thinking about like our meters. Money makes us creatures of time. Fascinating, right? So I heard this beautiful quote 20 years ago. I want to be a human being, not a human doing. And then I just changed this into nor a human earning. The way people talk about the things that we talk about now. This is actually from Weber and Karl Marx, Homo economist. So all of this could be summed up much better than I'm doing by Leonard Cohen, who said, we are not mad, we are human, we want to love, and someone must forgive us for the paths we take to love, for the paths are many and dark, and we are ardent and cruel in our journey. Ram Dass said it even more succinctly when he said, we're all just walking each other home. So all of us are on autopilot most of the time. We have these matrices of assumptions running around our head about what is normal. And as I said, or as I showed, normal is changing all the time. And what you consider to be normal, may not be normal for other people. This is about happiness. So I'll say that in the Harvard longitudinal study, the only thing that correlates strongly with happiness is the quality of our intimate relationships. From income of $0 to $5,000 a year, your happiness goes up exponentially, and then from $5,000 a year to, from $5,000 a year to $80,000 a year, your happiness will go up exponentially. And then from $80,000 a year income to $10 million a year, how much does it go up, your happiness? Nothing. Rich people, S. Scott Fitzgerald famously said, rich people are different from you and me. This is apocryphal. It's quoted, but anyways, I'll just say it. S. Scott Fitzgerald supposedly said, rich people are different from you and me. And then Hemingway famously said, yes, they have more money. So, wealth people just have a different set of problems. They don't have less. Actually, I think from the ones that I know, they have a lot more because they have a problem trusting people, that people really like them rather than just there for the money, right? Would they be there still if the money wasn't there? So how did we become so inauthentic? I love this quote. One brother asks his brother, "So why'd you grow up to be a drunk?" And the other brother says, "Because dad was a drunk." And then the other brother says, "Why didn't you grow up to be a drunk?" And he says, "Because dad was a drunk." So in the book I write, we become what we love and we become what we hate, and both are inauthentic. We become what we love and we become what we hate, and both are inauthentic. We, as babies, want our parents to help us survive, right? And so we imitate them. And then to individuate, we get tattoos. We do the opposite. So for the rest of our lives, even when they're dead, we're conflicted because we're doing this thing where we're trying to gain the appreciation. I mean, this was on Bill Maher last night, if you watched. Albert Brooks was on there, and he was talking about how he was crushing it on the Johnny Carson show year after year. And after he would get off the show, he would call his mom and say, like, "Did you see it, Mom?" And he would say, "Mom, what do you think?" He was always looking, he's like 80, he's always looking for his mother's approval. And his mother would say, "What did Johnny think?" It's really interesting. Like, so if you watch that, it's on HBO. So we become what we love, we become what we hate, and both are inauthentic. Everyone's seen this chart before. K represents what you know how to drive a car, you know how to use an iPhone, you know how to speak English, and then DK represents everything that you don't know. Hold on a second. You don't know how to change a carburetor on a Bugatti. You don't know how to create world peace. You don't know how to get your kids to listen to you. And then DK is everything that you don't know, which is infinite. And if you only speak one language, it's even less. Take a look at this.
She'll leave town early to get to a meeting.
It's too bad. Where's she live?
Chicago?
You gonna go upstairs?
We have that kind of relationship. Try it over there. That's right.
What kind of relationship do you have?
No, casual.
Sounds pretty special.
Works for us.
Don't you think there's a future there?
Never really thought about it. What's going on
Really never thought about it?
here? No.
How can you not think about that? How does it not even cross your mind that you might want a future with someone?
It's simple. You know that moment when you look into somebody's eyes and feel them staring into your soul, the whole world goes quiet just for a second?
Yes.
Right, well, I don't.
So here's one instance of somebody who knows what he doesn't know. So, as I said before, to understand why people are unhappy, we have to study consciousness, the conscious mind, and what we all assume that matrix of things that we consider to be normal. And then in psychoanalysis, what we study is what we know, but we don't know that we know. We're trying to uncover those things. That's the difference between psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. So maybe it's in your subconscious that those are the causes of depression, anxiety, anything like that. And if you practice meditation, you all know that the mind has a mind of its own. What do you see? What do you see? Callie, what do you see? Right, that's exactly what you see. So, I'm sorry it's a little fuzzy here, but do it again. You see 3 women upside down. If you look closely, you can squint. Do you see? Here, I'll do it with Adele. So this is Adele, $1,200 for a ticket for her for 3 hours. $1,200, I'm going to Portugal for a week, right? What do you actually see?
Wow.
So this is called the Thatcher effect, and now, you see, it's incredible, isn't it? So I'm going to ask 2 questions, just yell out the answers. What's the color of snow?
What?
And what do cows drink?
No.
Cows drink water. So don't believe everything you think, because you can be primed and you can be fooled. That's why magic and jokes are so important. So this is the funniest photo on the internet. But it actually became 100 times funnier for me yesterday when after 10 years I noticed this. What is that?
Texas A&M.
Right. That it makes sense. Man too stupid to use hat. It's brilliant, right? It's so good. Okay. So there's no immaculate perception. The map is not the territory. Ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is not a pipe. I forget what. I now can't remember the original title of Magritte's painting. So the reason he did this was to show you that you cannot smoke a painting, right? Like language is out there. It's a symbol. These letters, this painting, but it's not. And actually, if you study Lacan, he says that language estranges us from the real. And that's the kind of thing that interests me. So the psychotherapist, these first psychotherapists, I'm not going to pass out paper and pencil. This is something I did with Fred Luskin at the Compassion Conference in Berkeley 15 years ago. He said, okay, write down any problem in your life. My kids don't return my text messages. The brakes on my car didn't last 60,000 miles. My boss doesn't give me enough vacation. Okay, write down any thoughts about that. Well, my boss should give me more vacation. Well, the brakes should have lasted 60,000 miles. Okay, now write down any emotions about that problem. Well, it makes me feel sad. It makes me feel disappointed. It makes me feel unappreciated. Okay, write down any actions that result from that problem. Well, I lose sleep about it. I binge eat. I passive aggressively don't return my boss's text messages, things like that. Okay, so you have a piece of paper that has the problem, the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions. And then what I ask people to do is circle all the thoughts, feelings, and actions that solve the original problem. None. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions are maladaptive. Get that? Your thoughts, feelings, and actions are maladaptive. If you walked in this room at 2 o'clock and I said, hey, it's nice to meet you, you're your own worst enemy. You would either say, fuck you, and leave, or you'd be like, yeah, I know, can you help me? Yeah. So, again, we perseverate in bad choices and then we blame others for not trying new solutions. So what I'm asking you to do today is possibly try on some new solutions. Okay, again, we all have this toolbox full of hammers. I'm giving you some pliers. What would your mind design to do? I think that the mind's primary desire, you're trying to stave off potential future trauma. And some of you have heard this before. Your mind has 3 file cabinets: a past, a present, and the future. And what it keeps on doing is filing shit from the past into the future. So what I teach is authenticity, how to show up in the moment and be authentic. All right. And then I love this phrase, who is the author of your desires? Who is the author of your desires, right? Why do you want the shit that you want? Why do you think the shit that you think? I mean, most of what you think is shit, really. So we all do that, and why? And I think that you're trying to stave off potential future trauma. There was traumas that occur, and that's why I wrote the book, How to Survive Your Childhood Now That You're an Adult. So what I'm trying to do today is just get you to be that fish out of the water and take a look at your way of being in the world. We are weird, all of us. We're Western, we're educated, we're industrialized, we're rich, and we're democratic. Interestingly, 98% of behavioral science experiments are weird, right? But we only represent 12% of the world. So if there's a kid from Papua New Guinea and he's searching for a coconut and you say, wow, you look kind of stressed out, maybe you could use some Lexapro or whatever, right? It's like, it doesn't solve his problem, but like you have to understand that all of these afflictions are endemic within the culture, and then you look underneath the culture, you have things like capitalism, right? Or you look at this bullshit democracy that, we live in an oligarchy, right? So the afflictions that affect us are only within our society. And then, as I said before, the map is not the territory, yet we project our belief system onto the whole world. So what I'm interested in, because in Malibu there's 50 rehab centers, if we went to one of them today and asked any of what's going on, why'd you become an addict or something like that, they would talk about negative self-talk. And so I always ask, was there ever a baby born with negative self-talk? No, right? And yet half of us will be like, well, I'd be happy if I were president. Well, I'd be happy if I had $5 million. Well, I'd be happy if this. I'd be happy if that. So that shows up as not good enough, right? That's Melanie Klein, not good enough. And again, let's take a look at this thinking apparatus to see, if we can make some tweaks to that would bode well for our happiness. So most of our interactions as children are basically bigger people telling us what not to do. Don't stick your finger in the socket. Don't do this. Don't do that. That's how we civilize children in our cultures. We're making them into productive members of society. We tell them what not to do. So what happens is, this is Winnicott, we develop a false self in order to get our emotional and psychological needs met the best we can. We develop a false self, like we try to be cool or hip or look rich or I don't know what. All these influencers is this whole other phenomenon. Again, on Bill Maher last night, they were talking about how someone, put up something about Osama bin Laden. They put up a doctrine of his, and 15 million people in the first day said, oh yeah, this is the truth, this is reality, just like Elon Musk did about that other anti-Semitic thing. And the reason is because those people are trying to get viewers and likes. So it's this vicious circle that propagates hate, and because people are rewarded for it. So you have to look at these things, and then also, because we all live in our own silos, and the algorithms are like, oh, you like French music? I'll just play all French music. So we're so estranged from other things that we really have to take a look at the media that we allow into our lives. I mean, that on Wednesday at the Museum of Tolerance, they showed 43 minutes from Hamas GoPro cameras, and that's a really serious decision for we all see movies all the time. We all see people. I fainted in Saw, the movie. So I fainted and I had to leave. And there are certain things I can't unsee. I know that I can't unsee. So I don't want those images in my head. Okay, so. It's a little bit of a tangent. So on the outside, we have this false self, according to Winnicott, right? And then, it's a persona or a facade, if you listen to Carl Jung's persona. And then on the inside, we have this negative self-talk. So it ends up as this epidemic in our culture known as the imposter syndrome. And I showed this picture of Sally Field because she famously, the older people know, she was on the Academy Awards. She wins this award, and what did she say?
You like me. You really like me.
So if you look at people who are self-sabotaging, a lot of the times they don't have that inner self-worth. And again, if you go back, was any baby ever born with negative self-talk? The answer is no. So you have to look where it comes from. I'm not saying to blame anybody, but the famous joke is, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. So, again, I'm so sorry. This is all tangential, but the ninth chapter of the book is everyone should say our parents did the best they could with the tools they had at the time, and then healing comes sometime, usually on their deathbed, when they take your hand and they said, "We could have done better. We should have loved more." And hopefully, some of your parents will do that before then. So you don't have to self-sabotage, because to me, it's like a lot of things we do in life, even if our parents are dead, are this signpost. Like we're trying to attain some sort of acceptance, just like Albert Brooks was saying on Bill Maher last night, about from his mom. So it's a very interesting phenomenon to think about. We're born, we would die if our parents didn't take care of us, so we love them, and then we also do this individuation process. And in the first book, I talk about like when the baby goes to school for the first time, Yanov, who had a place on Abbot Kinney, used to say, when you put a baby down for the first time and say, "This is your own room, this is your own crib, or the parents are going to sleep in the other room, we'll be back in 8 hours," the baby thinks, "You're killing me," because it knows it can't exist without you. And it doesn't know what 8 hours is. It's just dark and alone and swaddled, and that's it. And then, if you also listen to Yanov, he'll say that that's the primal abandonment wound. Primal abandonment wound. And then for the rest of your life, when someone breaks up with you or you get fired of a job, you're not experiencing that firing or that thing in the present moment. It's a reopening of the primal abandonment wound. Just a theory. So attachment, atonement, attunement, presence, and congruence. I'm going to go through two of them today. This is attachment theory for the people who don't know it. Jacques Lacan wrote a paper, he presented it in 1939, called The Stade du Miroir. So when you hold a baby up to a mirror, its eyes go like Stevie Wonder's. Why is that? Because it has no self, right? There is no self to see, right? There's no like you can't see your back right now. Like, how do you know, or how would you know in a mirror that like that's my hand and touching my nose? You wouldn't even have a word for that. But still, I mean, try to hold when you go home, just for fun, hold your cat up to the mirror. So, anyways, the point is that if you study Buddhism, this self that you do develop is a fiction. So, we have to be in control of that narrative. Hey, Marianne, I think it's a drop cold in here.
Yes.
I think it's a drop cold.
I'm sorry, what?
I think it's a drop cold in here.
Drop holding?
Cold.
Cold. It's too cold.
The air.
We can't change it.
Excellent. So, John Bowlby noticed that babies became distressed when their mothers were absent. So, go figure. Like again, the babies think like I will not survive alone. And then in 1969, Mary Ainsworth did this thing called the strained situation, where she took a baby and a mom into a room. They played for a little bit, then the mom left, and then the baby did one of four things, which we'll discuss in a second. And then the mom came back, and the baby either attached securely, or didn't. And at that time in 1969, she found that I think it was 33% of the babies reattached securely. And nowadays, in particular, with all the swiping going on, I think that we would agree. Maybe it's just in Los Angeles that people really are avoidant. So here are the categories of attachment. You can attach securely, and let's say your parents are still together and you're going home and you're going to spend Thanksgiving with them, and your mom held you for the first couple of years and was attentive to you. You probably are able to securely attach to someone as an adult. And then the other three types are insecure attachment. the one that's most interesting to me, again, because it translates into avoidant, is that the mom leaves the baby, and then the baby like cries itself out, essentially. And that I was born in 1966, and my parents went to the Nietzschean school of child rearing. What doesn't kill it makes it stronger. So then the parent comes back into the room, and the kid goes like this. Well, fuck you. You left, and it hurt, and if I reattach, it's just going to happen again. So that's what avoidant is. People who swipe left all the time, right? You're avoiding intimacy because the breakup was so painful that you don't want to go through that trauma again. And it's a good thing for dogs, and you'll notice all the single people walking their dogs. This is a tough crowd because that was an objectively funny joke. Moving forward, so the other types of insecure attachment are anxious, ambivalent, and then disorganized. Disorganized is fascinating to me because I think that manifests, like the kid doesn't know what to do when the mom comes back into the room. So that's interesting to me because I think it manifests as borderline personality disorder, and the typical. And again, I have this DVD called Mindfulness for Depression. I have a chart of people's moods up and down. If you're up for 4 days and then down for 2 weeks, that's bipolar 2, and you take this medication, blah, blah, blah. And if I had to make that chart again, I would put borderline personality disorder at the end of the chart. I do not think it's a personality disorder. I think it's a mood disorder, and I think that people have bad tools. Meaning, so you say to them, hey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. And they're like, fine, I'll just go kill myself. And you're like, what the fuck? I'm going to be 15 minutes late. But there, again, it's like this primal abandonment wound, and you've triggered it.
So the disorganized one or the ambivalent one?
The disorganized, I think, translates later in life. And then I sat with Sue Johnson, whose book, Height, is beautiful. And she talked about the different forms of insecure attachment manifesting later as depression, which is also fascinating. So the first one, people are able to ask for assistance. They can securely attach to people. And I don't think that I've met a lot of these humans. I'm sure they exist in Idaho or someplace else. And then the second one is avoidant. And I do meet a lot of those humans. And because they work at Air One. No, I'm joking. Outgoing. Again, not a. So, you know what avoidant is because I described that. And then there's anxious in a relationship. And it's fascinating to me because I sat with Harville Hendricks once, and he said, if one of the two people have one foot out the door, the relationship is over. It's really interesting. And so that translates to anxious attachment. Like if you really don't know. And I work with people like that, and you can see, particularly if you study Gottman and his understanding of the couples, and the Four Horsemen, like that, why something is not going to work out, because one of the people have one foot out the door. They really just maybe don't even have that muscle to securely attach. And then the last part, disorganized, where it's just flip-flopping back and forth. This is a PDF file it's already online. So yeah. iraisal.com/library.pdf. This is how you end up later with positive or negative thoughts of yourself regarding whether those first 5 years of your life you were able to securely attach and trust your mom. And these things obviously are not written in stone. You can, work hard to unbecome one of these things. But what I'm interested in, as I started this lecture, I don't know who discovered water, but I doubt it was a fish. That's the water you're swimming in, right? That's what you were given. You were thrown into language. You were thrown into. There's a beautiful poem by Wallace Stevens. You know that he said the title of the poem is "How One Chooses One's Parents." Right? And if you study Buddhism, which I'm pretty sure Wallace Stevens didn't, but came up with the same thing. Like you chose your parents for a reason. So again, there's no blame here. Like, it is what it is. Unfortunately, if you if you are just suspicious of everybody, because you're afraid and to attach to people, you extrapolate that, I think, into finances, into every part of your life. So why that's interesting is, as Jan Martel says, to choose doubt as a philosophy of life is akin to choosing immobility as a means of transportation. Right? And then Einstein says, this is in Chicago, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as if nothing is a miracle, and the other is as if everything is a miracle. And living in these challenging times, I'm not going to ask you to make a decision on that, but it's a very interesting phenomenon. A book came out 2 weeks ago by Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University called Determined, and he thinks that, I ordered the book. I haven't read it yet. Don't want to talk too much about it, but I saw him speak a couple of times. We're not dancing bears, but pretty close. And that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in. It's like, I think that if you know the zip code zip code where someone is born, and like where they graduated high school and college, like you'll know if they drive a BMW or a Maxima. Like, there's just things that like you think, like, that's why I ask, who is the author of your desires? Like, you think you know why you want the shit that you want, but actually, there was this, someone came in to the office and they said, Google has an algorithm that can predict within like 90% accuracy of where you will eat on January 14th. And it's really true. If you were able to look at my GPS and my credit cards, like, I probably eat at like 5 places, and you, with a high degree of accuracy, could determine like, oh, like, I don't know this, but like Thursday is sugarfish night. Like, I don't realize it consciously, but for some reason, it is what it is. So if you were at Google, you'd be like, oh yeah, the long-haired Jew eats sushi on Thursdays, So again, you think you have autonomy, but we'll all have to read Robert Sapolsky's book and see how much is actually determined. Okay, so there's a book called Marriage as a Path to Wholeness, wherein Harville Hendricks says, the purpose of marriage in America is to enable you to complete your childhood. Your parents had deficits, those deficits wounded you, those wounds became defense mechanisms, and those defense mechanisms became your personality, and you'll always attract people who can replicate the dynamics from one or more of your primary caregivers. And then Marianne Williamson adds, if they can't replicate them, you'll train them to. So we all have a wounded child in us, and what happens is that we get so comfortable with partners that we feel like we can exercise that wounded child, and we're actually replicating some terrible shit that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago with the subconscious hope of having a different outcome. You get that? So when you are in a relationship and someone resolves to or resorts to name calling or stonewalling or contempt or whatever, like, what I advocate for my patients is a tap out. And you signal to the other person they're not showing up as their highest self, they're not showing up as an adult, they're showing up as their wounded child. And like with children, you give them time out and you say, okay, 30 minutes or whenever the agreed upon time is, we'll come back to this and we'll address this as two adults trying to solve a problem rather than wounded children absurdly trying to reenact something, hoping for a different outcome. I love the book Drama with Gifted Child by Alice Miller. Essentially, my fortune cookie out of it is that, parenting comes in ebbs and flows. And what I think is that my generation was the children were meant to be seen and not heard. And you have all these people with fifth chakra problems. That's a joke. But really, tough crowd. So it's fascinating to me, if you look at a generation of people and they feel as if they were appendages, like they didn't have the right. And then Shefali's book on conscious parenting, she goes to the other extreme, and it's like engaging the children so that they speak their truths or speak what they're thinking, and then you have a dialogue about it. But, I grew up in a household where parents would say things like, your opinion is wrong. Fucking joke, man. But still, like we weren't allowed to just express ourselves just like freely as equals. Like children were meant to be seen and not heard. Okay, so from the book, attachment, atonement, attunement, presence, and congruence adds up to authenticity. We went through attachment, and now we'll go through atonement or at-one-ment. So, I'm so sorry, I want to go back. So that is a painting from Barnett Newman. The last time I saw it, it was in MoMA. It's called One-ment, right? And as you know, because we all speak English, one-ment is not a word, right? But you put at in front of it, and you have at-one-ment, atonement, right? So, for me, that is to make whole again, to realize your inner wholeness. And you do that through the tool of forgiveness. So that's why I wrote this book. And you need to learn how to release the resentments about things you cannot change. If you came home and saw your child pushing a square peg into a round hole, you'd say, stop it. And that's what your mind does all day long. So there's this beautiful quote, you're perfect, and there's room for improvement. Now, unfortunately, your mind, actually, I think it's the brain, the prefrontal cortex is a binary machine. And you can't see both an and, you see either or. And that's why it's hard for you to understand your inner divinity or perfectness or the fact that you are pure love, or whatever you think is, underneath all of that. So your body gets traumatized, and then what you do is you create grievance stories so that it doesn't happen again. Again, you have 3 file cabinets, past, present, future, keep filing shit from the past into the future, and it comes up in the form of woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't. I'd be happy now if I went to Yale. I'd be happy now if I won the lottery. I'd be happy now if my parents didn't get divorced. That shit didn't happen, right? Why is your mind doing that craziness? So Eckhart Tolle says, you either accept your life or change it. Any other position is insane. You either accept your life or change it. Any other position is insane. Right? Basically saying, if you complain, you're insane. So forgiveness is not condoning someone else's behavior. It's a new definition. Forgiveness is releasing your right to resent that something happened. Forgiveness is releasing your right to forget, to resent that something happened. So something I'll say is re-feeling. You're feeling something today, something that happened 20 or 30 years ago. So there is what happened in the past, and then there's your story about it. And unfortunately, your story includes a judgment. So the Buddha made a distinction between discerning, like look both ways before you cross the street. That's a discernment, right? And then cars are bad, like, you know, if you're standing there, that is a judgment. And you have to be able to discern between a discernment and your mind making a judgment, because judgment is a prejudgment, which is a prejudice. And we're all more prejudiced than we like to think. Okay, so these grievance stories keep us hooked into the shit that happened, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Everyone raise their hands like this. So on the count of three, I'd like you to clap last Thursday. 1, clap last Thursday. Okay. So you can't change the past. What good does it do complaining about it? You cannot change the past. So again, as I mentioned, there's 50 rehab centers up there. They all are working on the resentments that our minds cause or create to help stave off potential future traumas. So if you've been to any of those meetings, you'll see people say resentment is like poking yourself in the eye and waiting for someone else to go blind. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to get sick. I love in the end of Act 2 when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are trying to trick Hamlet, and he says, "There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And then Nietzsche says, "There's no such thing as a moral phenomenon out there. There are only moral interpretation of phenomena." And then Miles Davis said it best: "It is what it is." You know, I at another conference I went to, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was there, and someone asked them, "Who's your greatest teacher?" And obviously, you think the Dalai Lama is going to say the Buddha. And what does he say? The Chinese, who killed 2 million of his people with hatchet handles and knives, and you know. So again, you don't understand like what's going on. But at some point in time, like when you're getting divorces from someone, you probably are not looking at them and saying, like, "Thank you for teaching me so much," right? But in 30 or 40 years, you might look back and say, like, "Oh yeah, you know, I learned a lot from that." So, new definition of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the ability to accept a no. It's the ability to accept this did happen. This actually happened to me. And to release this thing that your mind does. This should not have happened. It did happen. Stop trying to clap last Thursday or shove a square peg into a round hole, you know? Accept your life. Forgiveness means giving up all hope of having a better past. Forgiveness means giving up all hope of having a better past. Unforgiveness is our desire to share our suffering. Unforgiveness is our desire to share our suffering. If you are not willing to forgive someone, it means you are not done suffering yet. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Pain does not cause suffering. It's our intolerance of pain that causes the suffering. Again, if you're there, your arm's broken, like you're not thinking, "Oh, what's for dinner?" Like pain is immediate. Like you have to address it. That's something. But then 3 years later, you're like, "Oh, if I hadn't broke my arm, I'd be number 1 at tennis." You're causing your own suffering. You see? All right. So we're terrible with grief in this culture. Grief is not getting, you know, you have these expectations about reality. And as some people say, expectations are disappointments waiting to happen. Expectations are disappointments waiting to happen. So for me, we all have to learn how to grieve. We're terrible. If you know anything about the DSM-4 and 5, they eliminated the bereavement exemption because they found that the same medications that treated depression were good for bereavement. So, you know, again, the whole understanding of mental health in our culture is, can you work? And if you think about that, it's seriously fucked up, right? I mean, if something terrible happens, you know, you lose a child, something, like your boss is like, wow, that's really rough. Why don't you take 2 weeks off? You know, you never get over these things, but you have to like create rituals and figure out a way to forgive yourself, forgive other people, and to accept that, you know, life is full of these things. So again, the Buddha taught skillful means, and you know, we have a whole culture based on vengeance and things like that. So we have to be the ones who say, it stops with me. I will not pay my suffering forward. It stops with me. I will not pay my suffering forward. I am going to break this chain of unskillful solutions. Again, our parents had one box of tools. Today, we have more tools, and in 30 or 40 years, you know, people might be much more sophisticated and have even more precise tools. And if you read the headlines today, I would say that they fucking well will have better tools than we have. So just as a thought experiment, like, who do you need to forgive today in order to be free to show up authentically for the rest of your life? Who do you need to forgive today? That one unary trait, that thing that keeps coming back to, like, oh, if I didn't get rejected from this school, I would be the president of Twitter now, or whatever Michigas craziness, you know, your mind is feeding you. So what grudge or woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't do you need to give up so that you can be free for the rest of your life? Again, the books are on authenticity, attachment, atonement, attunement, presence, and congruence. Just did attachment and atonement. Maybe I'll be invited back here next year and we can do attunement, presence, and congruence. They're all in How to Survive Your Childhood Now That You're an Adult. And I will conclude with this section on happiness. So happiness is a moving target, right? It's like the horizon. You run towards it, it just moves away, right? Because your mind is like a hedonic treadmill. Once one desire is sated, it'll be quickly replaced by another desire, right? That's the problem with happiness. Your mind is a hedonic treadmill. Okay, so I love this quote. Happiness cannot be pursued. You do not find happiness. Happiness finds you. It is not an end in itself, but a byproduct of other activities, often arriving when it is least expected. And this is the whole thread of what I teach, which is essentially positive psychology, which is there are this set of practices and tools that are scientifically proven to keep people at the edge of the higher edge of their happiness spectrum, right? And that's the best you can do in this lifetime. Again, and the irony of what I'm teaching is that like you know that the one thing that correlates strongly with happiness is the quality of your intimate relationships, and yet like you have this set of traumatized tools that inhibit or preclude you in some way from really securely attachedly because you're afraid of getting hurt again. So Nick Hornby has this funny thing. He says, it's not true that money can't buy happiness. It can. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's somebody else's happiness. So happiness is what you have divided by what you want. And in the East, in the West, we try to make the numerator bigger. We try to have more shit. We think that'll make us happy. And in the East, they try to be happy with what they have. You want to? So essentially, you know, we're all doing quite well, and we have to just continue to have gratitude for these things. So, you know, the glass is either half full or half empty. It doesn't depend on the glass. It depends on your perspective, your way of seeing things. And let me just, so your mind, if you want to reduce my talk to a fortune cookie, which you're free to, you can just say, you know, your mind was built to create resentments. And that's what's making you an asshole today. So you can't pull out all the weeds from the garden, but you can replace them with flowers, which is gratitude lists. So again, you you can wake up tomorrow morning. You could say, I woke up. I have clothes to wear. I have running water. I have food to eat. That's probably more wonderful things than half the other human beings on planet Earth. So you want to be happy, make gratitude lists, make a gratitude visit and thank someone, smile. It's proven that if you smile, it makes you happy. Get enough sleep, exercise, spend time in nature, perform random acts of kindness. For me, avoid comparisons. And when people come into my office and compare themselves with their older brother, older sister, things like that, or their college roommates, it's insane. Because every human being has their own karma, right? It's not, I haven't read Sapolsky's book yet. I don't think it's completely predetermined. But if you think in your mind, oh, I'd be happy if I were Angelina Jolie, I'd be happy if I were this, I'd be happy if I were that. It's insane, right? You're measuring your insides with someone else's outsides. You don't know what kind of suffering these people go through. And this is what social media thrives on, right? So avoid comparison. Actually, I teach people to be happy for other people. My best friend became president of a big corporation and was paid $1 million a year when he was 30 and called me up, and then a week later he called me back. And I was like, hey, how's it going? And he said, I just had to tell you that I called all my friends from business school, and when I told them I was president of this huge corporation and being paid $1 million a year. And by the way, for you young people, 30 years ago, $1 million was a lot of money. So, he said, Ira, when I called all my friends in business school and told them I could hear the jealousy in their voice, and you were the only one who was genuinely happy for me. And so I'm just calling to thank you. So if you want your own happiness, there's a word for it in Greek, compersion. It's not compassion, it's compersion. It's the opposite of schadenfreude. It's taking joy in someone else's pleasure. Know that experiences make people happier than possessions. On your deathbed, you will remember walking through the streets of Paris in the rain. You will not remember the handbag you had. Experiences are important, better than any material possession. Vocation in Latin is calling, your vocation. What is the universe calling you to do? In Sonia Lyubomirsky's book, The How of Happiness, there's a study done in Germany where people who have jobs are miserable. If you do something for money, you're miserable because you're just, And if you do something as a career, which is just a job over a elongated period of time, those people, guess what? Miserable. And then the only people who are found to be happy are the people who know their vocations, their calling. What is the universe calling you to do? If you do something for money, as those elderly people said, you will be miserable. If you work for money and you're not making the world a better place, your heart's not in it, you're not serving others, you will be miserable. And I have a lot of people who, that's this whole industry of antidepressants, because they're just like the things that they have to do every day to earn money are so unfulfilling that they have to be doped up essentially. That might be my opinion. And then the last thing, meditate, and I'll give you a couple of bonus points. So learn to forgive everyone unequivocally, including yourself. Choose compassion over competition. Choose love over ego gratification. And that's, I guess, the main theme of this talk if you want to be happy. Choose love over ego gratification. And then choose authenticity and authentic communications. So let's see. I'm gonna just jump ahead briefly in the nature of time, and then again, we all have things that we can be grateful for. Just being here, being able to do this, being able to commune. We'll walk across the street for anyone who's interested. Afterwards, we'll go to Mendocino and grab some soup. And I always wanted to write an article. What is the meaning of soup? Right? Does anyone have an idea? I always wanted to write this. I've never said this out loud. I'm saying it now. I always wanted to write. What does soup mean? You know what it means? It means you're living in abundance. Because the first people who made soup, it means they collected too much stuff, right? And they had to do something to preserve it. What are all spices? How did all spices start? When you go home and you're like, oh, I'd like to put some cumin and some turmeric on my whatever. What are all spices? They all started as preservatives. What do preservatives mean? It means you have too much shit. You're living in abundance. So, sometimes I'll do an exercise that you can tell people about how grateful you are, but I feel like you've all gotten that. So I'll end with, we are the ones we have been waiting for. As I said before, we perseverate in bad choices and blame other for not choosing new solutions. So we can't kick the can down the road anymore. There was a report last week that climate change is a lot worse than we ever thought. That by 2050, the temperature is going to go up on the planet 2.5 degrees. You know, it's already the fires that we're having. You know, all these things. It's not. Planet Earth is not getting more fun. Let me put it that way. You know, there's a lot of problems, and we're the ones who have to address these issues. You can't say, "Oh, I'll just close my gate and let everyone else deal with this." So we will break this chain of unskillful solutions. We were given these things that we thought were our desires. Oh, I have to be rich. I have to be powerful. I have to be cool. I have to be an influencer. I have to have 2 million followers. It's all bullshit. It doesn't make anyone happy. You have to figure out what makes you happy and then live by that creed. And then, we all have to just be that change that we want to see in the world. So here's the definition of hell. Hell is on your last day on earth, the person you became will meet the person you could have become. That's all I got. These 150 slides are on iraisrael.com/library.pdf. I am going to sell and sign books over there. I thank you all very much for spending your Saturday afternoon here. And you can have questions and answers across to you.
Thanks, Ira.
Thank you. Do you have any announcements?
Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving.
That's your happiness.
Yes. Yes. Third? Okay.
You better if you do.
Okay, you're calling around.
You are hilarious.
Tough
Tough
crowd.
crowd.
I guess
And
it's
don't
just
block
about-
your stuff.